Today we are going to do a tutorial on the hardest shot to get in photography, and that is the tracking shot. And this tutorial is going to teach you how to create a fake tracking shot. And the tutorial is located on Google Classroom, and it's on week 28 under panning and tracking. And I'm going to be walking through this. Some of the steps I'm going to skip over a little quickly because we don't really need to do exactly everything, but I'm going to hit the highlights on this. And how we're going to achieve this fake tracking shot is we're going to select this car, we're going to lift this car up onto its own layer, then we're going to blur the background layer with a motion blur left to right, and then we're going to put the car back down on top of that blurred layer. So let's get started. Step one in the tutorial is to select the car. So I'm going to use the magnetic lasso tool to get not a perfect selection, but as clean a selection as I can, as quickly as I can. And I'm just going to go around this. And you can see it's catching good selection somewhere. It's catching the edges well somewhere. In other places, it's not at all. I'm going to include the spoiler, the rear wing on the car, in my selection. Okay, and I'm going to come underneath here. It's not going to do a very good job here at all. And then I'm going to get back onto the red. And when I get back to where I started, you'll see it turn into a small little zero there. And if I let go of the mouse, I have my selection. If you don't get back exactly where you started, you can click 2 times, and that will close up the selection for you, and you'll have your selection. So here's my selection. You'll notice that I changed the color of my overlay of my quick mask. The reason I did that is, here I'll change it back to red. Because the race car is red and the quick mask is red, it makes it really kind of hard to see where the selection ends and the car begins. So if you want to change the color of your selection, you can click this 2 times and you get a chance to pick a new color. And I just chose blue because it's not red. So I can see here that these areas are not selected and the areas that are red are. So now I'm going to go ahead and take my erase tool, make my brush a little bigger here, and I'm going to clean my selection up a little here, clean it up a little here. Okay, and I'm going to clean up around the spoiler just a little bit. And these areas inside the spoiler, I'm going to grab a paintbrush and I'm going to paint those back in. So we'll just go ahead and do this. So these will not be included in my selection. I want the car and I want the spoiler and I want all of that lifted up onto its own layer. I'll go ahead and get this painted in. Okay. And we're going to erase here. We're going to clean up a little bit here. There we go. Get my brush tool, paint a little bit back here. Make it look more like a tire. Looks good here. Need a little cleanup right here. We'll catch this on the, grab the erase tool, make it a little smaller. Grab that windshield wiper right there real quick. There we go. We'll erase this top part out right here. We'll erase this out. And I'm going to reintroduce you to a tool that you guys have seen before. Okay. I'm going to pick one of my selection tools. I'll go back to my magnetic lasso. And whenever you have a selection tool picked and you're in regular selection view, not the quick mask mode, you get this button called Refine Edge. And you guys have seen this once before. There's a big spot right there. Another one there. If you click on Refine Edge, it shows you your edges. Okay, here you have all these different views you can pick from. You can actually see it in Marching Ants. You can see it black on white is the one I really kind of like because it lets me see my edges without any of the distraction of the detail. So I know I'm going to have to clean up here a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and cancel out of Refine Edge. Go back to a quick mask. I'll paint some mask down right here. some more in right here, some right here. This is part of the spoiler here, part of the little wing. Whoops, didn't want to do that. All right, so I'm going to come back out from under that. And maybe that wasn't part of the spoiler. I'm looking at it now. It doesn't look to be part of the spoiler at all. So I'll go back and fix that real quick. Let's brush that in. There we go. Okay. Selection looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to my refine edge. So I have to have one of my selection tools picked. So I get the refine edge. Looks pretty good here. Now, if I click output here and I output it to new layer with layer mask and I click OK, as soon as I click OK, the car is now up on its own layer and it has this layer mask. And you remember, layer masks can be edited, so I'm going to go in here and do a little bit of final cleanup on this layer mask. And I'm going to paint some white right here to add to that little strut that's holding up that wing here as well. Okay, I'm going to flip my colors around and paint some black down to take some of this out. Okay, so I now have my car isolated up on its own layer. Here it's all part of the background layer. Here it's all isolated up on its own layer. So I'm ready to move on to the next step. Okay, and the next step is tidy up the selection, and I've already done some of that. Let's get rid of this. Okay, step 2 is tidy up the selection and clean up any stray areas, and I've kind of already done that. Step 3 is refine edges, and I just showed you how to do that. And refine edges had you output it to a layer with a layer mask. So you should have this look right here. Okay? And what I'm going to do now is I need to fill this background in. We're going to blur this background. And if I blur it as it sits right now, if I go to filter and I go to blur, don't do this just yet, and I go to motion blur, the problem is you're going to get these red streaks where the car is. Okay, you're going to get a really good looking motion blur up in this area here, but where the car is, you get these red streaks. I don't want that. We need this to be all gone. So if I load my selection by holding down Command and clicking right here on the layer mask, that loads my selection back up. And here on the background layer, with this selection loaded, I can say Edit, Fill, and I can tell it to use Content Aware. And what Content Aware is going to do is the program is going to go out here, it's going to look all around this car, and it's going to create background for me. So when I click OK, this is the result. You see it's gone down here and it's picked up little bits and pieces of background from here and from here and from here, and it's kind of composited them together for me. So I'll go ahead and drop my selection, and I'm going to go Filter Blur. And now when I make my motion blur, it's going to look like this. So you're not going to get the red edges of the race car. And I chose 50 as my distance. And when I turn on my background or my foreground layer, my car layer, it's starting to look like a tracking shot. It's starting to look like a shot that we followed this race car with our camera while we fired off photograph after photograph, because we've got the blurry background. Okay, let's take a look at our tutorial and see where we're at. Okay, we just finished cleaning up the mask. The tutorial had you add a blur layer. It's not necessary. You can blur that background layer. It's fine. And it went ahead and had you fill in with Content Aware, and it looks exactly like I showed you there. Okay, had it blurred. And there's one last step I want you to do. Okay, it has to add the motion blur, and there it is. We're going to make the wheels spin, because if we look at this, it's a dead giveaway that this car is not moving, or the fact that these wheels are not spinning. So I'm going to use my circular marquee select tool, and I'm going to click right about here. I'm going to circularly select this wheel. I'm going to make a circular marquee selection around the wheel. I'm going to make sure I'm on my background copy layer, the one that's actually showing through is the car. I'm going to make sure I'm not on my layer mask. I'm not. And I'm not going to make another layer like the tutorial suggests, because I can do it right here on this. I know I can. If I go filter and I go blur and I go radial blur, I want to make sure that this is in spin and not zoom. I want to make sure it's set for spin and not zoom. And I set the amount for 50, 57. We do that, and suddenly we've got spinning tires. I'll drop that selection, and I will do the same thing right here. I'm starting right about here, clicking and pulling down. I can move the selection a little bit after the fact. There that is. So I will go ahead and go to filter, and I will go to blur, and I will select radial blur. Same amount, and it spins. Drop my selection, and there we have it. This is a very convincing looking photograph that looks like it was really shot as a tracking shot. A really good one. Okay, and that is your faking a tracking shot tutorial.